Chapter 1. The End of an Era. The office was everything a legacy man's office ought to be. Timeless, understated, expensive. Walls of deep walnut paneling reflected the soft glow of a brass chandelier. An antique globe stood near the leather Chesterfield, beside it a crystal decanter, half filled with old scotch. The air smelled faintly of leather, paper, and pride, the kind of room where empires were built with handshakes and silk ties. Richard Dane stood near the bay window, back straight, fingers trembling ever so slightly on the polished edge of his desk. His gray suit was tailored to perfection, classic in its lines, just like him. Controlled, measured, a man of rules and bloodlines. Across from him, lounging with casual arrogance, was Mr. Lopez. Whatever his first name was, it was lost to time. He was simply Mr. Lopez. The younger man's suit bore a luxury label, but lacked the soul of craftsmanship. Too glossy, too sharp in the wrong places, a mirror of the man himself, all flash, little finesse. Mr. Lopez. Richard Dane's voice cracked slightly, then steadied. "You don't have to do this." Mr. Lopez smiled, a cruel, mocking smile. "You'll ruin me," Richard Dane continued, voice firmer now, desperation hidden beneath dignity. "You'll tarnish a name that stood for 3 generations. My father's father built this with his bare hands." Mr. Lopez raised an eyebrow. "So?" he asked simply, callously, unfeelingly. "This doesn't have to be war. We made an agreement. You gave your word." "A gentleman's agreement," Mr. Lopez scoffed, walking slowly toward the desk, fingers grazing the edge with mock admiration. "You still live in a fantasy, old man. Handshakes, honor, legacy. That world is dead. You just haven't gotten the obituary yet." Richard Dane clenched his jaw. "There is enough room in the sky for all birds to fly, Mr. Lopez. You don't need to destroy my house to build your own." "You're right," Mr. Lopez said, circling. "I don't need to. I want to, 'cause it's quicker for me, and I've never gotten anywhere in life by waiting my turn or playing fair. I take what I want. That's why you're standing here today, handing over everything." "You'll regret this," Richard Dane said softly. "You think power gives you immunity, but there is always a reckoning." Mr. Lopez leaned in, nose inches from the older man's. "Maybe, but by the time it comes, I'll be so far ahead, not even your ghost will catch up." Richard stepped back, his dignity collapsing into weary resolve. From the corner of the room, a set of polished doors opened. Mr. Lopez turned his head and called out, as casually as if ordering lunch. "Security, Mr. Dane is done here. Please escort him out." 2 suited men stepped forward. He didn't resist. He turned once at the door, eyes tired but proud. "You may have won today, Mr. Lopez, but building your kingdom on ashes never ends well." Mr. Lopez said nothing, just smiled and poured himself a drink from Richard's decanter. The door closed behind the once great man, and with it, a dynasty. Chapter 2. The Pawn. 26 years later, the building was the same, but the name had been changed from the Dane Legacy Group to Big Flash Global Investments. Inside the building, the walls of the top-floor office where Mr. Lopez had once driven out Richard Dane were no longer paneled. The antiques were gone. The decor, all solid and understated, were gone. In their place were endless miles and piles of marble and glass that had the effect of making the office look a little like a funhouse. It was said among those who saw it that it was unfortunate that money could not buy taste. And even after 26 years, the old-fashioned houses that had served the likes of the late Richard Dane would still not serve him. He was still the backstabber, the outsider they would not deal with if they could help it. The floor-to-ceiling window behind his throne-like chair no longer offered a skyline view. Towering new structures had long since swallowed it whole. The morning sun no longer streamed in. Instead, the office sat in perpetual shadow, like a kingdom under siege. to glimpse the city's glittering sprawl beneath a sky streaked with late afternoon gold, one had to crane their neck and search for what was once proudly in plain sight. Lula stood near the massive desk, her teeth so tightly clenched that she had to remind herself to relax or risk cracking a tooth. Tremors raced through her limbs, frustration disguised as restraint. Her father sat like a sovereign before her, and like a sovereign he dished out orders in that easy tone that expected no contradiction. "You'll meet him for dinner tonight," he said, without looking up from the papers he was signing. "Chandler Dean is a good man, ambitious, proven. He respects the empire I've built. That's what matters, and he will take the company further than I have been able to because he is one of them." Not being one of them. That had been her father's excuse for his every business difficulty for as far back as she could remember. She knew he had married her late mother in an effort to break into their circle, to become one of them. But when that had failed, he had neglected her, putting all his hopes in the daughter he named Porsche after his first luxury car. A name she had grown to hate as early as 4th grade when the teasing and bullying started. Her mother had changed it to Lula without her father's consent, and he had been mad. Only the steady, disobliging stare of the headmistress had prevented him from changing it back. And then her mother had died and he had let her use it, though he himself still referred to her by Porsche. He had spared no expense, sending her to the best schools to make friends with their children. But though she made very close friendships, he himself was still rebuffed. It was only when his other 3 marriages failed to produce children that he had given up and decided to use her as a pawn, her beauty in exchange for a seat at their table. It was then that she became his prisoner. "I am very busy tonight," she said quietly, her voice sharp despite her effort to keep it even. "I have to meet with my professor tomorrow morning to discuss my project." "Reschedule," he replied without flinching. "You won't need that degree anyway. You'll have something far more powerful." Lula swallowed hard. She didn't cry. She never did. She was her father's daughter after all, but not by choice. "Not need my degree?" "You told me to learn so I could lead the company," she said. "I said you could learn," he corrected. "Not lead, not alone, not now. You're young, emotional, idealistic." "I'm 24, she snapped before she could stop herself. "Not a child." He looked up at her now, finally. His eyes were ice, dead pools of black ice that had frozen out empathy decades ago. "You're my daughter, Porsche, and that means your life serves more than your own whims. The Lopez name is built on strategy, not sentiment." She looked away, hiding the fire in her eyes. She hated that name. Porsche. When he called her by it, it reminded her that she was nothing but a brand, and now that brand was being traded. "Chandler Dean is 10 years older than me," she said, quieter now, hollow. "So," Richard replied, "he's brilliant. Already the leader in tech and design. He is a good match." She bit her lip. "Big Flash Global Investments," another name she hated. It sounded like a Vegas act, not a multi-million-dollar legacy. She didn't mind that it was her birthright, but she hated that she was being sacrificed at its altar. "So I'm the dowry now?" she said, daring, forcing a thin smile. "The final asset in your failing portfolio?" Mr. Lopez banged his fist on the cold marble table. "Enough," he commanded. Porsche, Lula, looked at him, and in her gaze was all the bitterness she couldn't say aloud. The dreams abandoned. The betrayal. The utter powerlessness of being his daughter. But she bowed her head. "Yes, father." A quiet moment passed. Her hands were trembling again. She hid them in the folds of her skirt. "You'll wear the blue dress," he said, his voice clipped, final. "The one from Milan. It makes you look refined." She didn't answer, just turned and left the office, her heels echoing in the silence behind her like gunshots. That night, Lula stood in front of the mirror, the navy silk dress clinging to her like it was made specifically for her, which it was. Her dark curls framed her face, eyes red-rimmed with suppressed tears. She looked every inch the heiress, but inside she was screaming. She would meet Chandler Dean, the man who already owned more of her life than he had any right to, and she would smile, because pawns don't cry, they survive, and they bide their time. Chapter 3. The Wooing. He was already waiting when she arrived. Chandler Dean stood by the window of the private dining room at the Grantham, an exclusive rooftop restaurant only the elite knew how to enter. The golden hour sunlight cast a soft glow across his sharply tailored navy suit, the color echoing the same shade as her own gown. She was struck by him as she looked him over. Tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that could have graced the cover of any magazine, and his easy confidence, it dripped off him like fine cologne, powerful and intoxicating. He turned as she approached, his eyes locking onto hers with a look that was equal parts admiration and possession. "Porsche," he said, offering his hand, his voice deep and rich, reminding her instantly of coffee with coconut milk and sugar. "Or do you prefer Lula?" The corners of her lips twitched. "Lula. Beautiful," he said, smiling. "It suits you far better." Their hands touched. His grip was firm yet gentle. She felt a flicker of electricity zip up her arm, betraying the resistance she had felt at the thought of effectively being sold to him. He pulled out her chair. She sat, and he proceeded to disarm her over Wagyu beef tenderloin with black truffle juice. "I saw you first at Columbia. You were walking across the lawn with your books in one hand and your phone in the other. You didn't notice me, but I noticed you." She arched an eyebrow. "You were at Columbia?" "Just a guest speaker. One of the tech symposiums last year. I came to see Professor Atlas Bean. You know him? Biochemistry and molecular biophysics, and then there you were." He met her gaze, and she felt a flush rise in her cheeks. "I had no idea who you were," he continued, "not until later that day, but you impressed me before I knew your name. The way you spoke in that panel discussion, so articulate, so passionate. You challenged the moderator like you had a right to be there." "I did have a right," she replied. He smiled. "I know. That's what made you unforgettable." He told her stories of his rise, modest beginnings, relentless grit, sleepless nights spent building tech systems and design modules, bootstrapping his company from a garage to an empire. He admired her ambition. He agreed with her views on ethical business practices, innovation, and female leadership. It was as if he echoed every thought she'd ever had. She wanted to resist him, but she couldn't. He didn't court her with flowers. He courted her with admiration, respect, and promise. Within 2 weeks, he was a fixture in her life. Dinners, walks in Central Park, private nights filled with quiet laughter and whispered confessions. He made her feel like the most desired woman in the world, not because of her name, but because of who she was. He told her he loved her, that he had loved her before he even knew her, that he wanted to build a future with her before he even knew who her father was, and despite knowing who her father was. When he proposed, he didn't kneel. He simply looked her in the eyes and said, "Say yes, Lula." She had never been wooed so expertly. She said yes. Her father beamed with satisfaction when he heard the news. A contract was signed, an official partnership between Chandler Dean Enterprises and Big Flash Global Investments. The merger promised enormous gains for both companies, but more importantly, it signaled the final approval. Chandler Dean was now family. They married quietly within weeks, the ceremony held at her mother's favorite garden estate outside of Boston. Just a dozen guests. No press, no cameras, Just Lula, in a soft white dress, her curls pinned back with delicate pearl combs, and Chandler, so handsome, so perfect, so hers. She thought she was marrying for love. She had no idea she was walking straight into a trap. Chapter 4. The Cage of Silk. There were no fairy lights, no soft music, no wedding night bliss. Instead, there was a man in an unbuttoned tuxedo swirling brandy in a crystal glass, and a woman in white, frozen mid-step on the threshold of their honeymoon suite in the Bahamas. The suite was extravagant. Overlooking the ocean, it boasted floor-to-ceiling windows, rare wood furniture, and a private plunge pool. It looked like paradise, but Porsche Lula knew instantly it was a prison. Chandler sat in an armchair, shadows from the swaying palm trees slicing across his face. "I suppose now's the time for full honesty," he said, standing to face her. "You deserve that, at least." She smiled faintly, still flushed from the wedding, but wary. "That sounds ominous." He took a long sip of his drink. "You once asked why I loved you so quickly, why I wanted to marry you so soon." She tilted her head. "Yes, it's because I didn't come into your life by accident." He set the glass down. "I sought you out." Her stomach turned. "Let's start with my real name," he said, studying his glass. "My name is Dane, not Dean. I had to change it to achieve my aims, but now I have achieved them, I will change it back, reclaim my heritage, as it were. My father was Richard Dane." He sipped from his glass and continued. 20 years ago, your father, Pablo Lopez, ruined my family," he said. "He crushed my father's company, stole patents, used bribery to manipulate board members, forced him into bankruptcy and exile. You're wrong, my father. He died, Lula." Chandler's voice was calm but flat. "My father died in debt and disgrace, a man who once designed cities, and your father used him, bled him, and took everything he owned, even his office, even his staff. Everything. All he did was change the name on the building." She staggered back. "No, this isn't. I married you to get close, to avenge him, to destroy everything your father built." She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Chandler leaned in. "And if you ever think about leaving, calling for help or fighting back, I will release every file I've gathered over the past 5 years. The shell companies, the offshore accounts, the bribes, the labor exploitation, all of it. I have enough to bury him." Lula's knees buckled. She collapsed onto the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. He paced slowly. "I know you love your father. I also know he doesn't love you the way he should, but he loves his legacy. If you divorce me, I'll end him. If you speak to anyone, I'll show the press every detail. And you'll be the woman who married the man who ruined her own father." She said nothing. She couldn't. Her heart was thudding so loud it drowned out thought. Their honeymoon never left that chalet. For 2 weeks she stayed indoors. No beach, no sunshine, no kisses, no laughter. Just silence. She ate the lavish meals delivered through staff who never made eye contact. She cried until her face burned. She begged. She screamed once, but it changed nothing. Chandler didn't touch her. Not violently, not romantically. He didn't need to. His revenge wasn't physical. It was psychological. When they returned to the States, he moved her into one of his properties in upstate New York, a modern fortress surrounded by wilderness. No neighbors, no phone, no Wi-Fi, no visitors. Her world narrowed to the size of 4 walls. Still, he provided everything else. Designer clothes, fresh linens, gourmet meals prepared by invisible staff. "You're not a prisoner," he said once. "You're protected. This is about loyalty, family." But it was a prison, only it was lined with velvet. The twisted part was, sometimes he would sit beside her and speak kindly, about business, about art, about the corruption in old money. And sometimes he still called her Lula. His voice would soften, and for a moment she'd forget he was her captor. He wore sincerity like a second skin. but she knew it for what it was, a mask. Meanwhile, Chandler's strategy unfolded with ruthless precision. He revealed to Pablo Lopez a series of images, photos of Porsche, alone, sitting curled up in a corner of a mansion that looked luxurious and soulless, a tracking shot of her through a security camera, pale and lifeless. With each package sent to her father, another business partner stepped back. A funder withdrew. A tech patent deal fell through. Big flash global investments began to crumble. And Pablo Lopez, the great Mr. Lopez, he was losing his mind. "I could give her back," Chandler said in one of his messages, "but what kind of father lets a man like me have her in the first place?" He never touched Lula, but he let her imagine what her father imagined, and that was power enough. Her father pleaded at first, "Let's renegotiate. Let's talk." But Chandler didn't want negotiations. He wanted collapse. Slowly, Lula began to notice changes in the house. The staff became less frequent, her food less extravagant, the art disappeared from the walls. He was dismantling everything, even around her. One day she heard him on a call. "Yes, I've been bleeding him dry from both ends. It's almost poetic. The daughter trapped, the empire crumbling, the name disgraced." She curled into herself in a corner of the room and sobbed into a pillow until her voice broke. She had once been a woman of vision. She had walked stages, challenged professors, dazzled boardrooms. Now she was a bird in a glass cage, watching her world collapse, unable to save even herself. She had become even more of a pawn than she had ever been. She raged against her father for trading her, then against her own self for falling for it, then against Chandler for winning her heart, because she did not believe in her heart of hearts that he was actually evil. After all, if the roles were reversed, would she not do the same? Did her father not deserve all that was happening to him? She understood now why he could never belong, why high society had never let him in. He had killed a man and worn his skin. He was truly a wolf in sheep's clothing. To have he temerity to actually occupy the offices of the man he had betrayed. It was little wonder Richard Dane had died broken. After a few months of living the life of a political prisoner, her own resolve returned, and with it a determination to escape. She hated her father for being the cause of all of this, for breaking two families, but she loved him still with a bond that blood ties. She had to find a way to save him, even if she could not exonerate him, so she formed a plan and began to put it into action. Chapter 5: The Switchblade. Chandler returned home late one evening, his shoulders heavy with the weight of a long boardroom day. The sky outside was dark, but the house, usually humming quietly with the activity of his trusted staff, was eerily silent. As he stepped through the threshold, he immediately noticed the difference. No butler greeted him. No quiet music played in the background. The scent of fresh cuisine was absent, and the hallway lights flickered, half the sconces dimmed. Something was off. "Rosa?" he called out. No response. He moved swiftly down the corridor toward the east wing where she was kept. Her room, her golden cage. The door stood open, wide. The room was empty. The bed neatly made. Her wardrobe open, empty hangers swinging lightly. A single orchid stood on the vanity. She was gone. His heart dropped. He rushed back to the foyer, already pulling his phone from his jacket, fingers flying to call his most trusted partner. "She's gone," he muttered to himself. "Damn it, she's gone." But before he could make the call, headlights sliced through the front windows. A black car pulled up the drive. He froze, phone still in hand. The car door opened and she stepped out. Not the broken, defeated woman he'd held captive. No, this was the Lula he had courted. Confident and bright. Her hair was glossy, cascading in waves, still smelling of citrus and expensive shampoo. She wore a pair of sunglasses on her head, and carried branded shopping bags in both hands. She sauntered in, removed her sunglasses with a flourish, and gave him a look so calmly composed it chilled him. "You are back, husband?" she said with a wide grin. "I gave the staff the night off and the promise of a higher salary. And the promise not to report them to the police for abetting a kidnapping. They're loyal to whoever pays better, it turns out." "You left," Chandler said slowly, his voice tight. "You came back." She placed her shopping bags on the marble console and leaned against it with a half smile. "I left to see if I still remembered how to live, and I came back to show you that I remember how to fight." He stepped toward her. "What game is this?" "No game." Her voice sharpened. "I have evidence of everything. The false imprisonment, the blackmail, your knowledge of my father's crimes, and your role in covering them. I have names, dates, and documents." He went pale. "You're bluffing." She stepped forward, unzipping her purse and pulling out a sleek USB drive. "This isn't a bluff. This is leverage." He stared at it like it was a weapon. "I should take it to the police," she continued. "But I'm tired. I'm tired of being used by men on missions for revenge. I'm not my father's sins, Chandler. I was just born into them." "So what do you want?" he asked slowly. "A deal." She walked past him into the living room, reclaiming the space. "We work together," she said, turning to face him. "We dismantle Big Flash from the inside. I help you take down my father. In exchange, you don't destroy the legacy, just the man behind it. We split control, 70 for me, 30 for you." He laughed bitterly. "You want me to trust you?" "No," she said coolly. "I want you to trust yourself. You said once that I was intelligent, that you admired my fire, but you underestimated me." He studied her. The calm confidence in her voice, the strength in her spine, the gleam in her eyes. She wasn't the caged girl anymore. She was her own fire. And strangely, he felt the first twinge of something dangerously unfamiliar. Respect. 70 for me then, and 30 for you. After all, it was my father's legacy, he countered finally. That may be true, but he lost it fair and square to my father. Yes, my dad went too far, but from what I have been able to research, it was your father's porous business practices that let the wolf in. Chandler couldn't argue with that. 50-50 then, he said. And what about our marriage, she asked him. What do you want? You married me under false pretenses. I hate you for it. You used me, you tortured me. I want it annulled. I will give you your annulment after the deal is completed and not before. Don't forget, we have dirt on each other. I can still make it so that your father goes down and the company crashes till it's not even worth the printing paper in the printers. She thought for a moment. At least this way she would get a good piece of the company. If she sided with her father or insisted on going her own way, she would get nothing. Deal, she said. Do we need to write it down? Considering our shared family history, I insist that we do, he replied, only half joking. He was obviously dealing with higher street smarts than he expected to find in the beautiful Porsche Lula Lopez. Months passed as their sham of a marriage continued, but as a team they worked seamlessly. Their difference of conviction did not hamper the smoothness of their collaboration. Chandler wanted revenge, Lula wanted freedom. Would either fold? Neither could be quite sure. But for the time being, they went ahead with their plans, holding hands in public and saying the bare minimum in private. Lula's father, though he saw his daughter free, could not get her to divorce her husband under pain of being exposed as Chandler's threats still hung over him. But the attraction between them could not be hidden, not even from each other. They lived together, although in different rooms, and now they lived alone since Lula had rearranged the staff's routine to ensure privacy for their work. They relaxed as nature and proximity took their course. It began in small moments. The way Chandler made Lula her coffee the way she liked it without asking. The way she looped him into every data lead before he had to request it. They stopped second-guessing each other's angles. Trust didn't arrive with fanfare. It settled in like quiet, dense fog, blanketing all their previous wariness. They avoided it at first when their hands brushed and when their eyes lingered too long. They pulled away like it had been a mistake. It hadn't. The mistake was believing they could work in lockstep, sleep under the same roof, chase the same enemy, and not feel the gravity between them building. And yet, they resisted. Neither wanted to be the first to cave. Both understood that giving in might feel like surrender, and neither of them surrendered easily. But still they preened for each other, deliberately attracting the other's gaze, though they would each deny even to themselves that they ever did so. And so they went on, Chandler taking of his shirt in the kitchen to drink cold water after a morning run, pretending not be aware of her hungry eyes on him as she pretended nonchalance, and Lula busying herself in the living room late at night, pretending not to be aware that her nightdress was see-through. Delighting in the bobbing of his Adam's apple as his gaze wandered over her. But still they resisted. Until working together very late at the office after finalizing the last piece of a major merger that would cement their control and destroy her father's stranglehold on the board, they sat side by side at a long, sleek conference table in the executive office. The building was quiet. The city outside glowed. Chandler poured 2 cups of brandy. "To taking back what was stolen," he said, clinking his against hers. "To freedom," she replied. They laughed, speaking softly, leaning closer as they reviewed the final edits to the new company charter on Lula's computer. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, and she pretended not to notice that his eyes lingered not on the screen, but on her lips, as she murmured quietly and poked her little tongue out as she typed. Suddenly, the lights went out as the building manager shut down the building for the night, unaware they were still working. The glow from the screen was their only illumination. They froze. She laughed quietly. "We've been at it too long." "I guess so," he said, his voice low, deep. She was quiet for a moment, hearing the need in him that echoed in her. "Maybe we should go?" she asked softly, but he said one word, "Lula," with a voice that had turned gravelly, urgent, all restraint and pretense thrown aside. He wanted her, and he wanted her now. Her eyes closed as her body responded to the longing she had been holding back for months, and her lips parted as she felt his hot breath on them. And on that conference table, in the warm darkness of their shared victory, beside the ghost of old betrayal, they crossed the final line. Whatever the world saw in them, victim and captor, daughter and avenger, was burned away in that moment of truth. They were simply husband and wife. Chapter 6. Forever together. 5 years had passed since the night the lights went out in the office and Chandler Dean kissed Lula Lopez. 5 years since the Cold War between father and daughter ended in a hostile but bloodless takeover. 5 years since Lula had turned from pawn to queen. The company once known as Big Flash Global Investments had undergone a radical transformation. Under Lula and Chandler's leadership, it was rebranded as Lodine Capital, symbolizing not only their partnership but a new era. The firm was now a top player in clean tech, digital innovation, and socially conscious investments. It was the phoenix that rose from the ashes of betrayal and legacy sins. Chandler, once fueled by vengeance, had found peace in the woman he once used. His love for Lula was quiet but unwavering, grounded in admiration and the shared mission they had built together. She, in turn, had forgiven but not forgotten. She used the memory of her father's manipulation to fuel every smart decision, every bold move, and every ethical standard she now upheld. But the past was not done with them. One crisp autumn morning, a leaked dossier appeared in major business outlets. It contained internal emails, recorded conversations, and the original agreement between Chandler and Lula to topple her father. At the heart of it, Lula's signature on the power transfer document. It was clearly meant to destroy her. The source was anonymous, but she knew her father. This was his final strike, aimed not to win, but to ruin. Within hours, Chandler offered to take the fall. "I started this," he said, pacing their sleek penthouse living room. "Let me end it. I'll resign. Take the blame. You can say you were coerced." "You were, Lula." She shook her head. Her face was calm, resolute. "We tell the truth, all of it. And don't worry, Chandler. I will cover you." The press conference was held in Lodine's headquarters, the same building that had been passed from dynasty to dynasty through legacy, betrayal, and now love. Cameras flashed, reporters buzzed, shareholders held their breath. Then Lula and Chandler walked in hand, the very picture of grace under fire. They told the story from the beginning, how her father had cheated and manipulated his way from the start, how Chandler had married her to try to recover Richard Dane's legacy, and how, through a strange twist of fate and shared goals, they had built something honest from a foundation of pain. "I don't ask for forgiveness," she told the crowd. "I ask for understanding. My father taught me that success should be grabbed and scrambled for. But I've learned that real success comes from mutually beneficial collaboration, building lives, and embracing the future with hope." The fallout was chaotic but temporary. The transparency disarmed the public. Shareholders rallied behind the couple. The government launched an investigation into Mr. Lopez, not Lula. The old man was arrested within a month, a bitter king, toppled by his own greed. The end.